The Cannon Fodder conveyor, Putin has signed a law on year-round conscription into the Russian army.
We feel confident, secure and stable, and despite certain inevitable losses, which of course will be due to many different circumstances and factors that may arise along the way, we remain optimistic.
The new law allows military enlistment officers to operate without interruption, and dodging service will become even harder.
Well done. Victory will be ours. Absolutely. Victory will be ours.
But this optimistic attitude will soon leave these heroes.
Never go to the special military operation. You'll end up in the number of people you've lost, it's just...
And you'll lose even more because Putin is doing everything. For this, according to the new procedure, army recruitment will take place throughout the entire year, from January 1st to December 31st, and not just during the spring and autumn drafts.
All of this is clear evidence that the Russian Federation openly acknowledges the truly catastrophic nature of its significant personnel losses, as well as the failure to accomplish its intended tactical level objectives in the so-called special military operation.
According to the new rules, draft notices can now be posted in the state electronic registry. And the deadline to report to the military enlistment office must not exceed 30 days from the date the notice is published.
A roundup is already underway across the territory of the Russian Federation. First and foremost, these measures have affected citizens from the Central Asian republics. In addition, it should be noted that this decree will lead to an increase in the number of Russians leaving the territory of the occupying country. Let me remind you, as a result of the so-called first wave of partial mobilization, according to estimates from the Russian side itself, more than 1.5 million citizens left the territory of the Russian Federation.
At the same time, Putin signed another law that allows reservists to be involved in guarding critically important infrastructure facilities. Russian media note that this is about strengthening control over military and energy structures.
Apparently, this is about the covert nature of the mobilization. That is, under the guise of involving reservists, those citizens of the Russian Federation who are part of the so-called combat reserve and have signed the relevant documents with the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. It appears that they will be sent directly to the line of combat contact, and strategic facilities will be protected right on the front line.
Simply put, Putin's new rules effectively legalize year-round raids and constant pressure on conscripts. And while the Kremlin dictator makes decisions from his cozy office and claims that Russians are voluntarily lining up to go fight.
Our guys are going voluntarily, they're going on their own. And for us, it's 50, 60 at a time. Thousands come on their own every month, guys.
At the front, Russian soldiers cursed the day. Some were lured by money but ended up with nothing. Others were simply deceived and thrown in as cannon fodder.
My head cleared up real quick. It took me literally 3 or 4 months to fully understand what was really going on there. I'd rather get locked up, let them throw me in jail.
Since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the aggressor country Russia has lost about 1.5 million soldiers.
Since the beginning of 2025, 336,000 Russian citizens have signed contracts with the armed forces of the Russian Federation. And now attention, according to British intelligence estimates. The losses of Russian occupiers from January to in the month of November amounted to 353,000 servicemen. In other words, the losses of the Russian army are much higher than its ability to replenish its personnel. So the issue of replenishing personnel through volunteers, even with financial incentives, and most of the volunteers are residents from the depressed regions of the Russian Federation, does not solve the problem of replenishing personnel.
No matter how many soldiers the Kremlin sends to Ukraine, only defeat and death await them here. And the Russian ruler understands this perfectly well, but frankly, he doesn't care.
The wounded and maimed are sent into assaults, unwanted soldiers are simply eliminated, and if someone doesn't want to sign a contract, they'll end up signing it anyway. But the newly minted soldier only finds out about this after the fact. It's also nearly impossible to resign from the army. Even single fathers who by law should be released without issue are not allowed to leave. During this time, their children are simply placed in orphanages.
According to single fathers interviewed by Verstka, commanders may initially just refuse to accept their resignation reports, denying dismissal verbally. If the documents are accepted, they can be lost, But the soldiers continue to serve while their children temporarily stay with relatives or are placed in orphanages.
So it turns out that with a living parent, the children are orphans. But really, what can you say about dismissing a healthy man when even severely wounded soldiers aren't discharged from the Russian army?
They looked at us and said, "So what, you're fine without a leg." "Oh, that's a leg, a leg." Well, in a way it's the sky, but it's a leg. There's another guy sitting here like that all day too. What was I trying to say with that? They came in, looked around, asked who was there for what, and were told the reasons. All right, guys, got it. And they left them.
These occupiers will soon be sent on their final meat assault. The fact that some of them are missing limbs doesn't interest anyone. Their commanders just use them as disposable cannon fodder. Some occupiers still believe that the state will help them, so they complain to the Kremlin ombudsman about refusals, lack of medical care, or poor treatment. The number of such complaints has quadrupled in 2 years, from 459 to 1,976. The applicant's husband, after receiving treatment at a frontline hospital, was sent to the Military Medical Commission to determine his fitness for military service. Upon arriving at the military unit to receive the order and directions for the Military Medical Commission, he was sent to the front line. Since May 2024, he has been listed as missing in action. After being wounded or due to old health problems, not all soldiers are given time for full and proper rehabilitation. Sometimes a soldier is sent beyond the line despite doctors' recommendations to continue treatment and the need for rehabilitation. As a result, a serviceman ends up on the front line who is physically unable to carry out combat tasks. But at least these ones went to the front on their own. And there are cases when Russian men only find out after the fact that their occupation has been changed.
Black recruiting, black recruiters, they've turned into slave traders. We're basically witnessing human trafficking to supply people to the front.
Everyone, without exception, ends up in the crossfire. Cerebral palsy, mental illnesses, missing limbs. None of that matters. In the Russian army, they'll find a use for you. The local administrations, of course, know all about it. They even encourage and assist it. In
my home village of Kina, Cherkasy, they got a guy from Siberia drunk. They married him off to an elderly woman of loose morals and low social responsibility. They sent him to the front where he died, and now they're claiming compensation as his wife, even though he had never seen her in his life.
His commanders can help in the elimination of such a Russian soldier. The occupiers complain that unwanted soldiers from this special military operation are often sent on suicide assaults. One of these roles during an assault is called a beacon by the military. The occupier is sent without a weapon or body armor to expose the firing positions of Ukrainian forces. You just run in one direction with a blocking detachment behind you that won't let you go back. Your only chance to survive is to get wounded and be captured by the kakli, a derogatory term for Ukrainians. The occupiers admit not only to being eliminated by their commanders, but also to killing civilians. A Russian soldier recounted how his commander entered the wrong coordinates, which resulted in an artillery strike on a village. Many people died, including children. The soldier only learned about what happened after the administration of the so-called LNR complained to the command.
Basically, we mixed up the targets. Those for the Gorozhgrad and those for the Uragan units. The coordinates were given out the same way for both sectors, and the idiot who was on duty at the command post just mixed them up for the captain. And what does that have to do with me? They give me the numbers and I have to call the battalion commander. So he says, what do we do about this? It's fine. He says, 12 children and that 9 of them are from today.
Of course, the incident was covered up, and on Russian television they reported that supposedly Ukrainian soldiers were in that village. And these are just the stories that have come out in the last few days. In reality, the situation is much worse, and with each passing day, it keeps getting worse.
The Russian army has been swept by a wave of desertion. In the 4th year of the war, no one except the bunker dweller is looking for action. And no one believes Putin or Kremlin propaganda romanticizing the front anymore.
Stagnation. I want some action.
Instead, Russian soldiers are looking for any way to escape as far as possible from the Kremlin's action in Ukraine. For example, our partisans from the Atesh movement report about the mass flight of servicemen in the Kherson direction.
Cruel treatment by commandos, senseless assaults, and the lack of rotation are forcing soldiers to abandon their positions.
They decided to fix the situation in Putin's army in the typical Russian way. Instead of improving service conditions, they tightened control over the exhausted and half-starved contract soldiers. They set up reinforced blockades in the frontline areas, checkpoints and patrols.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
The military police are conducting total document checks and searches in pursuit of deserters.
Agents from among the local residents report that deserters often seize residential houses, and if discovered, they use weapons.
Moreover, Russian deserters have increasingly started taking hostages with them. Right now,
I am in a store with hostages. I'm holding a live F1 grenade without the safety lever. I just want to be taken to the prosecutor's office. I will surrender to the prosecutor's office.
the reason this Russian soldier was driven to such a radical step was the service conditions, the blatantly careless attitude of the command toward the lives of their personnel, and the ongoing abuse in the unit.
I am Sergei Sergeyevich Konstantinov, a private in the 60th Rifle Brigade, 9th Company, 3rd Battalion. I was forced to leave the front line. I had to leave on foot while wounded because my commander threatened to tie me to a tree overnight so that I would be killed by birds or to shoot me since I refused to carry out a combat mission while injured.
Punishment in the form of chaining someone to a tree in open terrain is, in general, a favorite disciplinary tactic among Russians on the front line. Instead of eliminating their own contract soldiers themselves, the command simply puts the penal troops in a visible spot where Ukrainian FPV drones kill them within hours.
I am a serviceman of the 25th Combined Arms Army, 67th Division, 36th Regiment, Assault Detachment. For 3 days now, we've been tied to a tree with handcuffs, without food, without water, without anything. They don't even take us to the toilet. That's how things are.
Not everyone manages to survive even a single day in such conditions. Surviving even more brutal punishments in the Russian army is much harder, says another deserter named Sergei. The 34-year-old Russian still can't believe that he actually managed to escape from the front.
We're going all in. That's it. Our lives and freedom are literally at stake. As long as the war goes on, I won't even be reset here.
And all because the Russian electrician who was mobilized refused to take up arms and go kill Ukrainians.
My crime is that I didn't want to shoot at people. The military police showed up. I told them, go fuck yourselves, just get lost, that's it. And they took me to Zaitsevo, where they electrocuted me. It was a device for charging batteries, where you can adjust the voltage and amperage, basically. One clamp to my earlobe, literally a crocodile clip, the other to my finger. And then they started, basically. They wanted to. What?
Why, for what?
They didn't want anything. They just electrocuted me, poured cold water on me. For an hour, sometimes an hour and a half, 2 hours. A food-grade hose. For no reason. Special effects procedures.
But no matter how much Russian army soldiers are intimidated in basements, their own generals' desire to survive prevails. Especially since, in the case of desertion, the chances of staying alive are much higher than in yet another meat grinder assault. Catastrophic losses at the front are another reason for the mass exodus from the front lines.
Why? Because it's one failure after another there. There, every third wounded soldier doesn't make it to evacuation. There are major problems there. There, so-called offensive operations have slowed down by exactly 2 to 3 times, as reported by American analytical centers. It's a failure there.
Military analysts say that recently, being wounded at the front for Russian soldiers is practically equivalent to being killed. Russian medics simply leave their own wounded, the so-called 300ths, to die at their positions. Partisans in the Russian rear also report that the situation with evacuating the wounded is simply catastrophic. The command of some units deliberately does not send transport or evacuation teams for wounded soldiers, condemning them to a long and agonizing death. Due to the lack of vehicles and evacuation orders, the occupiers die within the first day after being wounded. Many of them could have survived if they had received timely medical assistance. Officers of these units openly state that it's easier to find new people than to risk their equipment. This is direct evidence that the Russian army command considers its soldiers expendable. But this expendable material also tends to run out, just like the money to maintain it. The Kremlin's treasury is empty, unable to pay endless death benefits and, more importantly, the bonuses for signing contracts with the Ministry of Defense. The aggressor country simply has nothing left to pay with. As a result, the authorities in at least 8 regions of the Russian Federation have reduced one-time payments several times over in Taganrog, Chuvashia and the Samara region. There, the amount of 3.2 million rubles has been cut down to just 800,000 rubles.
This is an avalanche that has started. Putin has no money. Putin no longer has the means to directly provide money and maintain what is now a mercenary army.
No money means no fools willing to die at the front, analysts explain. The draft offices across the border have long been unable to meet the Kremlin's quotas. No tricks work anymore?
It's crony capitalism, just slicing up the cash. Here's the formula right now. People profit from the war and the population in the end loses its initiative. And
along with it, the desire to go to the front. But the desire to get away from that very front as soon as possible for any amount of money just keeps growing. This means that the Russian army will soon face a much larger wave of desertion.